Hey guys, Chris here. I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is October 6th, 2023. And let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, first I want to do a quick map overview. Last time I did it was last Monday, this Monday. And so I just want to talk a little bit about what's been going on in Orikhiv very quickly. So in Orikhiv, there's been reports that the Russians for the last few weeks, and that is something I didn't mention previously, they've tried to do some of their little counterattacks against the Ukrainian positions in Robotine. They try to destabilize, obviously, the Ukrainian gains, and they've tried that multiple times, not only in this axis, but also around Velika Novosilka. And actually, this is good news for Ukraine because this forces the Russians to expand military manpower, resources to try to claim villages that, in the grand scheme of things, don't really mean much. But for the Ukrainians, they know that this is kind of like the honey that attracts the bees, right? The Russians clearly need to have these villages under control, right? If they keep getting pushed back more and more, they don't have any bases, especially if they get kicked out of the Surovikin line completely by the Ukrainian forces, it'll be very difficult for them to do counterattack, an effective one, right? After they leave the Surovikin line, it's pretty much game over for Russia. They'll be on the back pedal much faster and much quicker. So this is kind of their way of trying to make life difficult for the Ukrainians. But the good news is that they have been ineffective and they have not been able to really dislodge the Ukrainian positions here. Again, one thing that the Russians will never run out of is manpower, right? The sheer amount of meat that they're going to be throwing on these different fronts is astronomical, and the Russians have made it very clear that they're okay to die for Putin, for the great patriotic war, for great grandfathers, for whatever reason, they're okay with dying for that. And so when they have a mentality that is pretty much very simple minded, there's a lack of critical thinking involved within the Russian units, and they're very happy, to see Ukrainians die. Well, that is what's making life very difficult for the Ukrainian forces when they have to fight just an army of literally orcs at this point. And we've seen their discipline. It's pretty much there's none. Their trenches are filthy. There's garbage everywhere. They're disorganized. They're poorly fed, but they're okay with these conditions. As far as I'm concerned, the only thing that they complain about is the fact that they don't get enough help. But they would be very happy to continue killing Ukrainians had they had, if they continue receiving the help from the Russian government. Anyway, I digress from this topic, but you can understand that right now the fighting is still pretty much the same. Nothing has really changed in the last few days, but it's good news that the Ukrainians have managed to keep the positions that they currently have. And now I think that due to the fact that the Russians have been incapable of doing their counterattacks, they have severely degraded here. I think it should make it easier for the Ukrainians to get better positions around Novoprokopivka in the next few weeks and Verbove. It's a long game here, but again, when you have such well dug in orcs, there's nothing really else you can expect but having slow gains. And the other axis, apart from the Orikhiv one, is the Bakhmut one, which is really meant to distract the Russians, continue having a severe and heavy Russian presence in this front, so they don't transfer them in the south. So the Ukrainians right now are focusing primarily in the south, and there's now reports that they're crossing the railway line between Andriivka and Bakhmut. It's a difficult movement. It's difficult to push here because, of course, there's open fields, and again, there's a very large Russian presence in this area. So far, that's pretty much the situation in the south and in the east. Pretty stable, no real gains so far, and I'll keep you guys updated as soon as we hear some more positive news in Ukraine's direction. Again, there's been some generals, American generals. I think General Hodges has been mentioning that Ukraine has been primarily focusing on three things. That is destroying Russian artillery. We've been seeing every single week it's between 40 to 70 Russian artillery systems confirmed to be destroyed, which is great. Second is their command centers, their HQ command centers. Really important. The Russians are heavily centralized. They depend heavily on their commanders and higher higher status commanders for direction, for guidance, for what to do next. And if these commanders are not there, the Russians are completely lost. They are disorganized more than ever. So that is also very important. And third of all is logistics. We know that Ukraine has been Ukraine's bread and butter tactic. It's destroying the stockpiles, key central routes that the Russians are using to transport fuel, medical supplies, food, all the necessary things to feed humans. So these three things is what we've been seeing the Ukrainians really concentrate on the last few weeks, whether it be attacks in Melitopol, Tokmak, where there's several Russian HQs, to destroying the HQ of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol, and we'll talk about a little bit in a few minutes as well. It's been really, really effective at really pushing the Russians more and more out of their comfort zone, degrading their capacity to counterattack and make decisions at a quick, efficient pace. So that's that for the map. Now I want to go back to the Black Sea Fleet, and we spoke about the Ukrainians effectively targeting the Black Sea Fleet HQ. Many of their ships have been destroyed as well, and so due to all these huge embarrassing losses in Sevastopol and in Crimea in general, the Russian Black Sea Fleet has been defeated. And I think I've mentioned that before, and it's been probably said before by many other people, but it's truly historic. A nation with a navy was defeated by another nation that did not have a navy and does not have a navy, right? It's absolutely historic in my opinion. I'm not a historian, but please write in the comment section if you can draw another historic example of a nation that was defeated, a navy that was defeated by a nation without one. So anyways, I think it's extremely embarrassing for Russia. As you can see, there's now satellite images confirming a lot of these Black Sea fleet ships were transferred to Novorossiysk. You can see that they have two Rapucha class ships stationed here. They have some Grisha class ships. Anyways, it's an embarrassing loss for Russia, and this is only good news for Ukraine because it further isolates Crimea, and it helps Ukraine get closer and closer to completely severing ties with Crimea. We know that the very last step is completely annihilating the Kerch Bridge and further isolating the Black Sea fleet in Crimea, because I imagine they still have a few patrol ships and a few ships, just a presence there, a small little presence, and obviously their soldiers as well. So that is the last step to completely severing, a connection between Russia and Crimea directly. Obviously, there's also the land bridge, but the Russians will probably try not to risk too much transferring, assets all the way from Donetsk all the way down to Crimea. It will be much more risky for them. They probably will do it because they won't have the choice, but it will be very risky for them. So I can only hope that Russia continues doing their goodwill gestures. This is a very nice goodwill gesture by Russia. They have achieved all of their military goals in Crimea. Let's face it, they've achieved all their military goals. Now they're going back to where they belong, right? So it's a very impressive goodwill gesture by Russia. Now, the other thing, as I mentioned, one of the things that Ukraine is really focusing on is the howitzers, is the artillery. And so this article confirms, and there's actually a graph as well that was attached to this article, that Ukraine has been really decimating the Russian artillery. And so this is proven by the fact that they are now losing more and more large 203 and 240 millimeter guns, so much larger caliber, whereas in the beginning, Russia was dominating almost exclusively using 152 millimeter guns. So they've resorted to using the Pions, the Tulpans, which are much larger caliber guns, much heavier guns. They probably have less ammunition for those types of guns. And that can only confirm that Russia is losing its main source for artillery, the 142 millimeter guns. And so again, this article reiterates that most of their shells are 142 millimeter within the Russian military, and their soldiers are best prepared to use these standard howitzers. Russia lacks barrels. And obviously, for modern howitzers, the amount of shots they can take before they need to be completely repaired or before they completely blow out is about 2,000 shots. And you can bet that the Russian booklet for maintenance is probably non-existent. So we've seen many of these videos and pictures on Russia's side of them just completely blowing out their barrels because they've been overusing them. And at the height of their artillery barrages last year in the summer, like people were saying, sources were saying that it was between 50 to 60,000 shots per day on the entire front line. It's insane, right? The amount of barrels that they have to fire this quantity of shots. So this is really good news for Ukraine because essentially Russia is lacking artillery. And let's face it, this war has been primarily an artillery war. The amount of videos we've been seeing is literally, whether it be on both sides, Russians targeting the Ukrainian positions with artillery, and vice versa. The Ukrainians targeting Russian positions with different types of artillery systems, whether it be the Caesars, the PHC, PHZ 2000, Panzerhaubitze 2000, the triple M7s. It's an artillery warfare. And so the less Russia has, the more Ukraine can have an edge, an advantage to quickly wear out the Russian army. And we can see as well how desperate Russia is because North Korea now, it has been reported to provide military support to Russia. And we know why Russia's been conducting talks with North Korea is because they have probably one of the largest stockpiles of Soviet weapons and ammunition besides Russia and maybe China. And that's why they went to North Korea. And if they're that desperate, that means that very soon Russia, we're going to start feeling, and Russians already complain that they lack counter battery fire. So very soon Russia is going to really be incapable at answering Ukrainian artillery barrages, Ukrainian advancements. And this is what's making life very difficult for the Ukrainians to advance very quickly in Zaporizhia and Bakhmut, is the fact that Russians have artillery and they're capable of still, shooting down on the Ukrainian advancements. But that, I think, is really going to change in 2024. Let me know what you guys think about especially my comments about the artillery. Do you think we're going to start feeling this sort of artillery hunger from Russia's side around Q1 of 2024, more in the summer of 2024, really at the end of 2024. Again, in my opinion, we'll start knowing that when Russia's going to be desperate for talks, or they're going to be running around different countries, try to make deals, whether it be more deals with Iran, with North Korea and China. We'll know that they're desperate and they really need weapons. So that's the video for today, guys. Thank you again for your support. Please, if you have any extra funds, help the Ukrainian cause, whether it be donate to the Ukrainian military, to Ukrainian organizations that are funding for drones or other things, military equipment. Please do it. This is helping the Ukrainian people win this war quicker. You've seen my post yesterday about the Russians continuously attacking innocent civilians. And yesterday was one of the most dramatic in the last few months, where they managed to kill 55 innocent civilians in Kharkiv. And it just hurts me how heartless and soulless the Russian people are. And the only way we can change this is by completely demilitarizing and reforming the Russian population. And that can only be done when Ukraine wins this war. So thank you for your support. Please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Slava Ukraini!